Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I had the pleasure about a year ago of interviewing Shirish Nadkarni. He's a really smart business guy and an author of a book about startup to exit, which was a real recipe for how technology companies primarily transition from startup to exit. And it was really quite an interesting conversation and book. He's now written another book called Winner Takes All, Case Studies in how online marketplaces are creating modern monopolies. Sounds kind of interesting. Shirish Nadkarni is a Harvard Business School grad. He lives on the West Coast of the United States. He's been involved in tech, and he's been fascinated by marketplaces and how the winners take all propositions become creating monopolies and monopolies that are problematic. And in this book, he explores the evolution of marketplaces like eBay, Amazon, Alibaba, etc., and how they've transitioned and become these next generation marketplaces like Airbnb, Uber, OfferUp, and others. He details the dangers of monopoly power, and he talks about what we need to do to stop them from riding roughshod over other market participants. Shirish, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So why did you want to write this book about monopolies? You say you were always fascinated by them. How can people be fascinated by marketplaces? That's kind of a little strange.
Yeah, well, there are two reasons. One is in my second company, which was called Limoca. It was a social language learning site. We created a marketplace connecting over 16 million language learners with over 300,000 language tutors. So I saw the power of the marketplace and how it can be an unstoppable force to becoming a huge marketplace. And then the sequence for my books was first with Startup to Exit was to lay the foundation for becoming an entrepreneur and providing a guidebook to help the entrepreneurs through their journey from ideation to exit. And with the second book, I focused on my passion, which is marketplaces, because my recommendation to entrepreneurs is, instead of just pursuing e-commerce, that they should really consider marketplace as a business model, because you don't have to hold inventory, you don't have to manage supply logistics. You essentially take a transaction fee from the transactions that are happening on your marketplace. And as I mentioned in my book, we can discuss in more detail later on. But as I mentioned in my book, they eventually become monopolies. They become huge markets. So my second book was really focused on a specific business model, which is marketplaces.
So we're going to have to explain, if we could, what marketplaces are, because what I would have thought you're describing is a network, a social network. But what you're saying is a marketplace. So what's different between an e-commerce site versus a marketplace versus a network, social media, a social network?
Yeah, an e-commerce site, basically you are the vendor, you are the sole vendor selling goods on the market, on your site. A marketplace is a site that brings together multiple consumers and multiple suppliers. So now you may decide to also participate in the marketplace and sell your own products like Amazon does. Amazon is both a marketplace and an e-commerce site. But they have like over 2.3 million suppliers, and most of the time you're buying from other suppliers rather than from Amazon. And then the social network, you have Facebook and Instagram, and they are not in the business of selling goods. Certainly there are people advertising on those platforms and networks, but they are not really enabling transaction on their platform between consumers and suppliers.
That's interesting, because I would have thought that a lot of these websites become more powerful when they start networking and people are interacting with each other. And I guess the interaction that you're talking about is between seller and buyer. That's the key interaction.
I mean, both of them, both social networks and marketplaces have the same phenomena, which is network effects. And so, which is that, with marketplaces, as more suppliers join the network, it becomes more attractive for consumers to join and shop there because there's a wide variety of suppliers, and as more consumers join the platform, more suppliers join the platform because there are more consumers that they can sell to.
And is
Similar
that
to
how
a
they
social
become
network.
the monopoly?
Yes, that's essentially how you become a monopoly.
So it's the network effects that you're
It's the
talking
network
about that
effect
help
that
it become
drives
a monopoly.
Exactly.
So that's what I guess I was focusing on, not the social network, but the network effects. And
Yes.
it's this reality that you've described that as more people join to buy, more people will join to sell, and
Yes.
it's a virtuous circle.
Exactly right. It's a virtuous
Fascinating.
flywheel, yeah.
So maybe we could take a break, and you can come and you can tell us a little bit about some of the different companies and the different marketplaces that you've described in the case studies in your book.
Absolutely.
We're going to take a break. We're going to be back in 2 minutes with Shirish Nadkarni talking about marketplaces and how they've created these monopolies. And these are the companies that we all know and lots of us have been making use of, particularly during the last couple of years of the pandemic, where internet sales have skyrocketed, and a lot of us have given up on shopping at the local mall. We've gone to the marketplaces that Shirish has been describing. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in just 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're talking about marketplaces today with the author of a really interesting book about marketplaces. My guest is Shirish Nadkarni. He is a serial entrepreneur. He is the author of a book, From Startup to Exit, An Insider's Guide to Launching and Scaling Your Tech Business. And he's now written a new book about marketplaces, which is kind of fascinating. He's been interested in marketplaces for a great deal of time. He's got a fascinating background. For 16 years, he was with a company by the name of TIE Seattle. He was chair of the TIE Entrepreneur Institute. He was chair of the Go Vertical Startup Creation Weekend. He was a board member. He was an advisor with Blooms Inc. He was an author of this book, From Startup to Exit, An Insider's Guide to Launching and Scaling Your Tech Business. He was on the Computer Science and Engineering National Advisory Board, and it goes on and on and on. And he's now the author of Winner Takes All: Case Studies in How Online Marketplaces Are Creating Modern Monopolies. Shirish, walk us through an example or two, if you could. You talk about eBay, Amazon, Alibaba, but then you say that they've evolved into sort of better versions like Airbnb, Uber, etc. Walk us through some of these examples, if you could.
Yeah, I mean, the evolution has spanned, multiple decades. There was what I call the listing era, which included eBay and Craigslist, where you simply went to a marketplace like eBay or Craigslist and listed the products that you had for sale, and then maybe there was a reputation system of some kind, but the buyer had to sort through all the suppliers and make a decision on what item to buy, and then they would conduct a transaction over the network. But over time, what you've seen is that these marketplaces have evolved to manage more of that transaction. And so you've had an example being Uber, which is a marketplace that connects you to drivers. They manage the connection directly for you. You don't have to sort through a list of drivers and then pick who has the best rating, and all. By the time your ride is almost done, so they connect you with. They figure out who is close to you, who has the best rating, all of that, and connect you with the driver. They allow you to track where the driver is and how long it's going to take them to come and pick you up. All of that is managed for you. Similarly with Angie's List, I don't know if you're familiar, if they have Angie's List in Canada, but it's a site for professionals and handymen and so forth. And they ask you all sorts of questions about what project you have, provide pictures of your project, and then ultimately to give you a quote from multiple professionals. So these marketplaces have evolved over time to manage more of the transaction and reduce the load on the consumers. And so, as I gave you examples of Angie's List and Uber and OfferUp and so forth, these are all examples of modern marketplaces.
Okay, but it's easier, a car bride is, it's more of a commodity, and closeness. The shortest time period to when you're going to get picked up is probably the most important criteria. And I presume the pricing is exactly the same for all the different people in the area. So I can understand why Uber can give you the next driver. But Airbnb, as an example, how could Airbnb, which I think allows you to search an area and look for anything? Does it recommend, the one that is most applicable to what you're searching for?
No, they don't at this point. They are more of a traditional listing kind of marketplace where you search through and specify your, but you can filter on a variety of different requirements, which you couldn't really do on eBay and Craigslist before. So you can say, I want the whole house or the room, and I want something that's dog friendly and blah blah blah, and allow you to very quickly hone down on the house that you most want to stay at. So that's another example of more work being done by the marketplace to make things a lot easier for the home renter.
Right. So with Uber, I have found that the payment system is one of the biggest attractions, that the payment system becomes far easier rather than me having to fungal with a credit card, and the end of the trip is far quicker because I don't have to bring out the credit card and pay the taxi driver and worry about the tip and all that kind of stuff. So the payment system ends up being critically important. Is that something that I don't even know how Angie's or Airbnb or some of these other systems work? Do they have a similar kind of ease of payment?
Yeah, I mean, all of them have the same. I mean, you basically enter a credit card and you store that credit card with the service, so it becomes a lot easier the second time around to and then this way they can also take a cut of the transaction. Otherwise, for somebody like Angie's List, it becomes difficult to manage that. If they become a conduit for the transaction itself, that's the key, because that allows them to take a cut of the transaction. And that's not necessarily true in all cases. OfferUp is a good example of that. I don't know if you're familiar with OfferUp, but they're a competitor to Craigslist in the US, and they're a site where you can sell used goods locally. But what happens is that you advertise on OfferUp, and then you meet the person somewhere that's safe to exchange the good, and so they don't get in the middle of that transaction, and so they can't take that transaction fee as a revenue source. They have to rely on advertising as a revenue source, for the business model.
This is interesting, and so what you're saying is that the more buyers, the more sellers, the more sellers, the more buyers, and that's helpful. We've talked about how you've gone from just listing to providing sort of the purchase decision for you. What about AI? Is AI going to change things? Is AI going to be starting to be used by some of these sites to help suggest? I find that, for an example, when I go on Audible, I really like the recommendations that are given to me, and I presume that it's some sort of AI that is tracking, what books I like, and while people might be bothered by the lack of privacy, that Audible knows exactly what I like to read. The recommendations are really helpful.
Absolutely. I mean, they're already using AI in exactly the fashion that you're describing, which is to make better recommendations for you. Same thing with Amazon. If you shopped on Amazon, they will recommend other products. If you're buying a product, then they will say other people have purchased these products and so forth. So they're doing clustering of some kind to identify similar products to recommend to the buyer. I can also see travel sites like Airbnb using ChatGPT to help you plan a trip to a certain location. I, in fact, did that myself on my own to plan a trip to Sedona in Arizona. I basically asked ChatGPT to, I'm planning to be in Sedona for 2 days. Please come up with a multi-day itinerary to help me plan my visit. And sure enough, it came up with really good recommendations, saying exactly at starting 8 o'clock in the morning, you go there, have your breakfast, and then you can go to this hike, after that, and then you can have lunch at this location. It's amazing what AI can do at this point.
And so how does all this create monopolies that scare you?
Well, we talked about the network effects, right? Which is that as more consumers join, more suppliers join. As more suppliers join, more consumers join. And it becomes, let's take Amazon as an example. Amazon has 2.3 million suppliers on their platform versus Walmart, which also is trying to become marketplace, but they have only 50,000 suppliers on their marketplace. And the reason is that most of the sellers are pretty small, and they have only so many resources to focus on marketplace, and it takes quite a bit of resources just to manage your inventory and your supply and your customer support on Amazon, let alone on another site. So multi-tenanting, which is multi-tenanting is difficult, then that lends itself to marketplace becoming a monopoly. And unfortunately,
so you don't think vendors are on numerous sites? They tend to just be on one.
It depends on the marketplace. It depends entirely on the marketplace. So multi-tenanting on e-commerce marketplaces like Amazon versus Walmart is difficult. Whereas multi-tenanting on restaurant sites for food delivery is somewhat easier. So you see there in those situations like food delivery, it's a winner take most, not winner take all kind of situation. In the US, for example, I don't know about Canada, but in US there used to be 50 or more vendors, food delivery companies in that space. It's now down to 3, and in fact, like 2.5. Basically DoorDash, Uber Eats, and to some extent Grubhub. So it's become a winner because there aren't too many restaurants, and so it's not that difficult for another food delivery company to host to host restaurants that are on somebody else's food delivery site.
So when these Amazon or Airbnb or companies become like monopolies, you end up getting the best choice and or the best opportunities to sell. So why is a monopoly bad in that case?
A monopoly is not necessarily bad, but it does, unless the management team, the CEO, is very religious about the issue, it becomes easy for the company to get into bad behavior. As an example, Amazon has a private label business, which is only 1% of their overall e-commerce business. And they have stated a goal of getting to 10%. And so the managers who are managing the private label business are under pressure. And what they have done is, even though they are not allowed to do so by company policy, they have been able to surreptitiously gather data about certain products in certain industries to figure out what new industries to go after, which is an example of abuse of power. Another example is, where they're self-preferencing those private label products versus other competitors. Apple is known to do the same thing, which is if you search for music, you won't see Spotify first. You'll see Apple Music first, even though Spotify is a lot more popular service for music versus Apple Music.
That's interesting. So what should happen? Should the government come in and break them up?
I wouldn't say necessarily, they may consider, for example, spinning off Amazon's private label business, but there needs to be some kind of regulation. I'm not a big fan of having too much regulation. I would like to see these companies continue to do well, but some kind of regulation would be warranted so that they don't really take advantage of the monopoly power and treat their suppliers badly. It should be a level playing field for the suppliers to compete on the marketplace.
So it's really interesting that you're seeing this evolution from just a listing service to, what do you call this service that you say is, it's a winner take all?
It's a winner take all. 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 It's a winner take all
is actually making recommendations.
A managed marketplace.
Managed marketplace. And does it go through another evolution with AI to something that's almost a recommended marketplace? It becomes
in certain situations that might make sense, where the service, like as we took the example of Airbnb, knows from past behavior, knows of your preferences in terms of what kind of homes you want, and it basically plans your entire itinerary for you, not just renting a home, but also what other activities you may want to engage in, and actually books those activities for you. So it manages the entire experience for you. So I can certainly see that happening in the very near future, actually.
And so what are the best examples of the three different types, the listing, the managed, and the recommended?
So listing, eBay would be a good example, because at least they had a rating system, so you could figure out who were trustworthy suppliers. Managed marketplace would be something like Uber, that manages the entire transaction of Uber or Angie's List, and then you have potentially in the future recommended marketplaces where Airbnb could really shine in providing great experience.
So, I think about Uber Eats as an example. So Uber, I get the closest driver, but Uber Eats is just a marketplace. It's just a listed marketplace. If I put in sushi, I get all the sushi restaurants. I don't get do I get the closest one? Maybe I do get the closest one, but it doesn't book me into the closest one automatically. It doesn't. No. It may recommend the closest one, but I get a listing of several. So what would Uber Eats do that would be like Uber, that would be more managed? Do you think it's going to say, this is the sushi you want? Or you've eaten too much sushi, you should now eat a hamburger?
No, it could do things like, when you're selecting items to order, it could provide some data about, more people have ordered this particular item versus other items and so forth. So they could provide some intelligence on.
So it's like the recommendations that I like on my book site or on Audible.
Yeah, right, exactly. Or it could say, hey, give me your budget and I'll plan a dinner for you. So it could do certain things in a more managed fashion.
Yeah, maybe it says, last time you ordered the salmon, did you forget it this time?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, this is fascinating. And so, Shirish, is this good or bad?
I think it's, to some extent it's good, because, today Amazon is a savior in many respects, in that, I can think of virtually any need, and I can type that into Amazon, and lo and behold, there'll be a bunch of suppliers who have manufactured that item. And you might have thought, who knows, is there somebody out there who is manufacturing it? And you will find that there's so many suppliers who are thinking of different kinds of needs that, in fact, I would say, Amazon should publish a list of all the search keywords, so that people can go think about products to go build against those keywords.
Now, internet sales, shot up during the pandemic, but they've come back down since, some people don't think COVID is over, but since COVID is sort of over. And, my understanding is that there was sort of a graph of the growth in internet sales that went up dramatically and came back down at the end of COVID. But it's still sort of equal to, if not above, where it was in 2019 and 2020 prior to COVID-19. But if it's come down so dramatically, what it would suggest is a lot of people, used Amazon, used a lot of these internet purchase opportunities, and didn't like it, or wanted to go back to the mall. So what do you think is going to happen to the proportion of retail sales that are sold via the internet versus in bricks and mortar?
I mean, there always are a class of shoppers. For a lot of shoppers, including my wife, shopping is an entertainment experience. It's a way to socialize. My wife goes to the mall to meet her friends, and they'll have coffee together, and they'll shop together, and so forth. That is something that the internet can never really provide. But I can see that over time, more and more of your shopping is going to happen over the internet. Once they figure out how to really standardize the problem with ordering stuff, especially clothing, over the internet, is that you can never really be sure about the sizing. And once they solve that problem or figure out a way to allow you to size it appropriately, as well as see yourself in a particular clothing item or dress or whatever, I think that will really grease the skids for for shopping on the internet.
Shirish Nadkarni, if people want to buy your book, Winner Takes All, Case Studies in How Online Marketplaces Are Creating Modern Monopolies, how do they do that? Do they got to go to a marketplace to buy it?
It's actually available on Amazon. I actually, for the second book, I chose not to use a publisher because I didn't feel the publishers were really adding any significant value. So I actually decided to publish using Amazon, and it's amazing. I had to write a book. I had to do my own copy editing and book design. But once that was done, it's all uploaded on Amazon, and they publish on demand. They don't carry an inventory of my books. They just publish on, you order it, and they'll manufacture it for you and ship it to you the next day. It's quite extraordinary.
You don't have 10,000 copies that are printed. You're printing as you need them.
That's what it seems to be the case. Normally I would expect Amazon to say, okay, create an inventory and then pay Amazon for storage of that inventory. I don't have to do anything of that sort. It's all done for me by Amazon.
Fantastic. So you are a beneficiary of these marketplaces.
Absolutely.
We're speaking with, I got the name confused because I was going to call you your brother's name. I apologize. Shirish Nadkarni. Shirish's brother is one of the smartest gentlemen I've ever met. So Shirish and his brother obviously share unbelievable intellect. Shirish Nadkarni has written a fascinating book called Winner Takes All, Case Studies in How Online Marketplaces Are Creating Modern Monopolies. It's available on Amazon. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back in just 2 minutes with Shirish. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're talking about online marketplaces today, which is really kind of an interesting topic with Shirish Nadkarni, who is a very smart serial entrepreneur, tech entrepreneur on the West Coast of the United States. And he's written a book called Winner Takes All, Case Studies in How Online Marketplaces Are Creating Modern Monopolies. This is the second book that he's written, and it's available on Amazon. And he self-published it on Amazon, which is kind of fun. And he's getting Amazon to print on order and supply on order, which is sounds like a smart way to do that. You can contact Shirish through www.shirishnadkarni.com. He's on LinkedIn and Twitter. He has a newsletter as well. Fascinating. Shirish, it'd be really helpful to me if you could sort of give some suggestions on how to ramp up, start up a marketplace, and also how to structure one such that you can exploit some of these network economies, if you could. I'll give you an example. So I work with a real estate development company, and there aren't a lot of real estate development that are online. And if you want to buy a REIT, a real estate investment trust, you can do so in the public marketplace. But one of the things that a lot of people like doing is buying private real estate opportunities because the returns are higher. Risk is higher, but the returns are higher. And you can do that in a public manner in Canada, and I think in the United States as well, if people have a certain net worth. And so they are assumed to have they're an investor of a certain caliber of size, so that you don't have to have a public filing. So we want to create a marketplace that will allow vendors of commercial properties to post those properties and those property opportunities online. And buyers of equity interests, maybe not 100%, but equity interests in some of those properties. And frankly, people that want to lend money in second mortgages, which is a very healthy business as well, to go online and look at some of these opportunities. And, historically, it's been high net worth individuals that have bought shopping centers or bought parts of shopping centers or apartment buildings or office buildings or warehouses and things like this. So if I wanted to create a marketplace and ramp it up that is for real estate, commercial real estate investment opportunities, how would I go about doing it? What would your advice be on how to create the model and how to create and generate the network effects?
Right. So one of the challenges with the marketplace, getting a marketplace off the ground, is that there's a chicken or the egg problem where suppliers don't want to join because there are no consumers. Consumers don't want to join because there are no suppliers. So it's almost a reverse network in effect.
Yeah, the reverse of the network effect. You got a non-network yet.
Yeah. You don't have a network yet. Yeah, exactly. So most of the time, what I recommend is to focus on a small geographic area or category. Number one, so it's more manageable to create a small network in that small geography, and then to focus on suppliers first. I'll give you some examples, and we'll come back to your own personal example. But Instacart, which is a grocery delivery service in the U.S., maybe in Canada as well, they got started by scraping the content of Safeway's website and publishing it on their own site, even though they didn't really have the permission to do so. And then they would let consumers purchase items until they got to a volume that they could actually go to Safeway and say, hey, by the way, we've been doing this for some time, and why don't you join our network as a formal partner? Same thing with DoorDash. They started in Palo Alto initially. Instacart started also in the Bay Area. And they basically took the PDFs of the menus for all the restaurants in Palo Alto and published that on their site. And then they would take the orders and actually literally call the restaurant to place the order and then deliver it to those consumers. So that's what I would recommend is in your case is to focus on the supply side of the equation, is to get perhaps select a specific market where you're located and identify the brokers who are making those properties available and publish them on their site. And then I would tackle the consumer side of the investors.
So get the investment opportunities first of all.
Sorry?
And then go out and get the
yes.
investment opportunities first of all, and then go out and get the investors. And then talking about the difference between listing site and a managed site. What we were thinking about doing is providing, as the marketplace, some due diligence activities such that we could provide a recommendation, effectively saying we've done due diligence, we think this is a good investment. So it's sort of like the Uber star system or the Amazon recommendation system.
Exactly. I mean, that's one of the chapters in my book is about creating trust to drive liquidity in the marketplace. So what you're doing is figuring out, you're creating your own rating review system where you have, I assume, financial analysts who are looking at the property and figuring out, how good of an investment opportunity it is, right? So it makes it a lot easier for the investors to actually trust your marketplace and make investments. Okay.
And any other suggestions on how to ramp it up?
You'll have to basically, on the consumer side or the investor side of the equation, I would suggest reaching out to all the local stockbrokers in your market, identify the ones that deal with high net worth individuals and network with them and give them a commission for every sale that happens. So that would be the way to kind of attract investors onto your site.
The table of contents of your book is really kind of interesting because it sort of walks through exactly what we've been talking about. And it's interesting. Maybe I'll just mention some of it to everybody. Your first section is the history of first-generation marketplaces, and you talk about the emergence of eBay, the battle of the consumer-to-consumer marketplace in China, open table. But then you talk about in section 2 the emergence of next-generation business-to-consumer marketplaces, the evolution of the marketplaces, the listing era, the unbundled Craigslist era, the Uber for X era, the managed marketplace era, Instacart, Airbnb, DoorDash, OfferUp. And then in section 3, you talk about business-to-business marketplaces, Alibaba for free supplier membership and premium gold supplier membership, Convoy, Upwork, Kaziva, I haven't heard of that one. And then the marketplace mechanics, network effects, multi-tenanting, local network effects throttling, commoditized versus differentiated supply, metrics for tracking network effects, evaluating marketplace opportunities, jump starting and scaling a marketplace, scaling the supply, scaling demand, marketplace business models, economics of pricing subsidies, avoiding disintermediation, marketplace key metrics, building trust in your marketplace, and then you finalize with marketplace monopolies and abuse of power. What a fascinating review of this business.
Thank you. Yeah, it's quite fascinating. Exactly. Yeah, it's non-trivial to build a marketplace, but as I said, if you're successful in creating the flywheel, there's a lot of huge amount of payoff.
Shirish, I wonder if you want to read something from your book to give everyone a sense of what you've got to say.
Absolutely. Perhaps I can read from the conclusion of the book.
Excellent.
All right. So while the thesis of this book is that marketplaces are a winner-take-all phenomena, the success of a marketplace is not guaranteed, and not all marketplaces experience the full benefits of network effects. There are several factors to consider as you're evaluating your marketplace idea. I've always been a big believer in the power of technology platform changes as a catalyzing factor in disrupting existing incumbents in the space. Generally, incumbents are slow to adopt a new platform and are therefore ripe for disruption. A prime example is OfferUp, which allows users to buy and sell used goods. They were successful in disrupting Craigslist, which was the 800-pound gorilla in the space. OfferUp was able to leverage the market transition to mobile by making it very easy for users to take photos of used items that they wish to sell. Users could also instantly communicate with one another by leveraging the instant messaging capabilities that OfferUp provided. Most successful marketplaces have jump-started their business by focusing first on the supply side of the equation and constraining the activities either by geography or category. DoorDash, for example, started service in Palo Alto area before expanding to other markets. It simply placed restaurant menus on its website and ordered on behalf of consumers. Later, as it received funding, DoorDash hired a sales force to call on restaurants and sign them up market by market. Similarly, Instacart scraped the inventory of the Safeway store and placed items on its website so that consumers could place grocery orders from its site. Later, as it got traction, it signed agreements with major grocery chains.
That's interesting. In both those cases, as you mentioned, it's very helpful to just get the vendors, the amount of suppliers up, and they did that very successfully. Sorry to interrupt. Please continue.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, deciding on the business model is another crucial aspect of making a marketplace successful. A take rate that is less than 20% is generally achievable. Only significant monopolies such as Apple and Google can charge take rates of 30%, and even they have had to adjust their rates in response to vendor complaints. Generally, you also want to charge the marketplace, the supplier, the take rate. Though companies like Airbnb charge the consumer as they want to incentivize homeowners to rent out their homes.
Let me interrupt again. What's a take rate?
Take rate is the percentage of the transaction that you keep for yourself.
So it's the fee.
It's the fee, the transaction fee.
Okay.
Yeah. Finally, building trust in the marketplace ensures strong liquidity. This can be achieved through customer reviews, though care should be taken to weed out fake reviews. Other programs like escrow service to protect consumers and an insurance program to protect suppliers, as in the case of Airbnb, are essential to creating trust in the community. I wish you all the best in launching and scaling your own marketplace. Please stay in touch to my website, www.shirishnadkarni.com.
Fascinating. Sounds like it's a lot of good advice for people that want to build these marketplaces, but also for people that want to just know about these marketplaces and the power of the monopolies. And I think that the interesting thing is, I was thinking, as we talked about initially, that the network effect was like a social media network effect. But what you're talking about is that you're actually creating this network effect between the sellers and the buyers, and that you're arguing, get the sellers first and the buyers will come. And that when you get more buyers, you'll get more sellers, but it's getting those sellers up to start with. That's the key. Shirish, if we don't want these networks, these managed marketplaces to take over, what do we have to do?
I think, as we discussed before, there's nothing wrong with, being a monopoly. It's making sure that you don't abuse the monopoly power. And so I think some level of regulation is essential to prevent abuses like self-referencing, access to proprietary, data, excessive take rates. All of these things can create, bad situation for suppliers, and it's important to create a level playing field.
If people want to buy your book, they go to Amazon, and what do they type in?
They would type in "winner takes all" and my name, Shirish Nadkarni, because there are actually a bunch of books with the title "winner takes all." So I'm not the only book with that title. So just type in my name as well.
Shirish Nadkarni, thanks so much for educating us on these marketplaces that are online, that are supplying so much of our goods today and growing exponentially. And it's interesting. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for joining us. Good night, everybody.